You are going to die. I am going to die. Everyone you know is going to die, except perhaps Brian Johnson. That exception notwithstanding. When you finally do get to the end, there's a good chance you'll realize that you did some things completely wrong. In the early 2000s, a woman named Bronnie Ware took a job in palliative care in Australia. For years, she spent her days with dying people, not in a hospital surrounded by machines, but in their homes over the final 12 weeks of their lives. She noticed something strange. When people knew that they were dying, they all said remarkably similar things. The first regret was not living true to themselves, making decisions based on parents, friends, family, etc., which is a topic we often cover on the show, but today I want to focus on the second most painful regret, which is that I wish I hadn't worked so hard. No one there declared that I wish I'd earned more money or I wish I'd gotten that promotion, but the opposite. They wished they'd worked less. They wished they'd been at their kids' baseball games. They wished they'd taken that trip to Greece. They wished they spent more Tuesday afternoons doing absolutely nothing with the people that they loved. Curiously, many of these people did have plenty of money they'd saved for someday, but someday doesn't exist. There's only today, and then there's nothing. So, hello and welcome to the Growth Mindset Psychology Show, where we ask what science has to say about self-improvement and we dig into some existential philosophy for ideas of what is a life worth living and how to live it. Today, we are reviewing some ideas from Mr. Bill Perkins, a hedge fund manager who made a fortune on Wall Street, and he recently wrote a book called Die With Zero. He makes the case that you should plan to spend your last dollar right before you die. Now, that doesn't mean that you run out of money at 72 and spend the next decade broke and desperate, but instead strategically balancing the time you put into working with the time you spend actually living. I think we all know that we wouldn't want to be a 95-year-old Warren Buffett with billions of dollars to spend and no time left to spend it, because we'd rather be the age we are now with much more time left to live. Of course, I know it could sound reckless planning to run out of money exactly as your heart stops beating, but as a philosophical exercise at least, it might have some of the most rational ideas in it that you've ever heard to help you make decisions that could minimize your regrets instead of maximizing just safety. So, stick with us. It's going to be an interesting episode that might make you think a little bit differently about life. Let's start with talking about Seneca. He was the Roman philosopher who lived 2,000 years ago, and he was obsessed with a particular problem. Why do people waste their lives? He wrote in an essay called On the Shortness of Life. In it, he pointed out something obvious that we all ignore. Life isn't actually that short. We just squander so much of it. And here's what he said. Life is long if you know how to use it. Most people actually act like they're immortal. They put everything off. They say, someday I'll travel. Someday I'll learn piano. Someday I'll spend real time with my kids. And then one day they're old and they look back and they realize they spent 40 years doing things they didn't care about. We realize that you're dying prematurely, not because of illness or a terrible accident. You're dying because of your choices mean that you never actually lived in the first place. Bill Perkins says something similar, just with a bit more maths. He says, money isn't money. Money is frozen life energy. So try thinking about it. If you make $25 an hour, every $25 in your bank account represents 1 hour of your life traded away, that you gave away to someone else. 1 hour that you spent in a meeting, 1 hour you spent commuting, 1 hour you spent doing something other than everything else you could possibly do with an hour of being alive. And so that's how life goes. We trade our time for money, and then we're supposed to, hypothetically, trade that money back for experiences that make the time we have left worth living. Yet, many of us get stuck. We accumulate money and more money, and we keep going as if we might live forever and then just die with plenty of money left over. And that means we traded away thousands of hours of our finite life for quite literally nothing, because you can't take that money with you when you're gone. Now, I know you might want to say we want to have an inheritance for your kids, and we'll be addressing that later in the episode, don't worry. But let's talk about some other psychology that gets interesting. Behavioral economists have a term for why we keep on trading our time for something that we're never going to use. It's called hyperbolic discounting, and a fancy way of saying that we're terrible at valuing time and money, and especially the combination of the two. There's a classic experiment where they presented participants with two options. In the first scenario, they asked people if they would want $100 today or $110 tomorrow. And most people took $100 today. They didn't have time to wait. They didn't have 24 hours to wait for an extra $10. They just were like, hey, I'll just spend my money. Now, in the second group of people, they offered them $100 in a year's time or $110 in a year and 1 day. And suddenly, everyone was willing to wait 24 hours for an extra $10. Now, it's the same choice. It's the same extra 24 hours for $10, but their brains treated them differently. And this cuts right into the heart of how we think short-term and long-term. In the moment, we're quite impulsive. If we're making a decision right now, we overvalue the immediate rewards. That's why we buy the $6 latte, even though we know we should probably be saving more. It's why we might skip going to the gym, even though we know we'll probably regret it in a few years' time. It's why we have the extra slice of chocolate cake or order takeout instead of cooking and scroll social media instead of doing art or writing songs or whatever important thing you keep on saying you'll get around to doing but somehow never find the time. Each of these small decisions feel very insignificant, but they add up. For example, if you have a $6 latte every day, that's $2,000 a year. These small impulse purchases can tie you to your job, and you need to keep working to fund a lifestyle of tiny immediate rewards that you forget about 5 minutes later. On the other side of the experiment, in the long term, we can be paralyzed when we try to imagine decisions happening in the future. As we saw in the experiment, we suddenly become very patient. Instead of thinking about what we would do with the money, we just panic and automatically assume that more will be better, and that's all we really know. This means we have the paradoxical situation that we both undersave for the future and at the same time oversave for a future that we can't visualize. When we think about what experiences we might want at 70 or what does a good life at 80 look like, most people actually have no idea, and they just conclude that they must just save more, and if the number's going up, that feels safe to them. As humans, we are both reckless in the short term, whilst overly cautious about thinking about our long term. And what takes the hit is the bits in the middle, planning that sabbatical year off to enjoy yourself. In the present, we forget that an 85-year-old body can't do what your 5-year-old body can do. Those doors will close forever. The Buddhists have a really nice word for this called anicca, impermanence. Everything changes. Everything passes. Your body now is not the same body you'll have in 20 years. Your interests and desires now will not be the same that they will be in 20 years. It's easy to remember how many stupid things you used to think were important when you were younger and now don't care about. Even something maybe 5 years ago. The thing is, that doesn't mean they weren't important then and that you couldn't have done more of them at the time you enjoyed them. Sure, I don't want to party as much as I used to, but that doesn't mean going partying with my friends when I was 18 was a bad choice. I loved those connections and I loved those moments, and that's fine. So you should make sure you have time to do the things that are fun for you whilst you're young enough to enjoy them. If you spend too much time clinging to money like it's somehow permanent, you just can't take it with you, and that's an illusion that will cause you suffering. If you're a bit too busy to ever take a ski trip for the next decade whilst you're focusing on saving, that might mean you never, in fact, go on a ski trip again in your life, because in 10 years' time, your bones will be creakier, it'll be harder to get back your ski legs, and maybe none of your friends even enjoy skiing anymore. So the solution to this isn't to be more impulsive or more frugal, it's to be more intentional, to match your spending to your life stage, to know what it is you're actually saving for in the future and not just saving out of vague anxiety, remembering that you can't take your money with you, and you have to think of the question of why are you hoarding it now and what could you be doing with it if you thought strategically across your whole life. This brings us to a new section where we can think about experiences that keep paying us forever. When I finished school, for example, I was 18 years old and my parents wanted me to get a job or to go to university straight away because that's a very sensible decision to make. And it was also the height of the 2008 recession and my dad's company had gone under. So yeah, we had plenty of reasons to be worried about money. Instead, however, I invested in adventures with a year off. I cycled the length of the UK, which was basically free. I spent 4 months scanning medical records in what was just like a factory of people scanning things. And wasn't the best 4 months of my life, but I saved up enough money just doing that to take a train around Europe, get a one-way flight to the Caribbean and find a job sailing around for a few months. I then was able to road trip across the USA and then backpack across South America. And yeah, I watched sunrise in Machu Picchu. I somehow was arrested in Paraguay for no reason at all and then released a few hours later because they're just corrupt and do stupid stuff like arresting white people. I met this guy called Little Chris at a bar at 3 a.m. who had a #1 record in the UK, who somehow found Drunk Me very interesting and got my number and was texting me for the next few days. I didn't even realize who it was and deleted all his texts until I found my photos of him meeting him. It was like, I deleted all the texts from this famous person who wants to hang out with me. Whoops. And yeah, plenty of stupid things. One time I got lost in California trying to find an organic farm and ended up staying with a Mexican drug dealer who told me it was too dangerous for me to be knocking on random people's doors. And so I was like, yeah, sure, I'll just stay with a drug dealer instead. Great. And he was really fun. Showed me all his guns and other things. We're still friends on Facebook. Lovely guy, very hospitable to strangers. So yeah, I learned a lot about life. And when I got to university by the age of 20, I had lived enough that I just didn't need to go drink every night like most people do when they start university in the UK. And I tried so many different things in life. I'd already learned about stuff I cared about. And so when I got to university and I was studying engineering, I actually quit after 1 month and went to study biology instead because I found it more interesting and I was just better at knowing what I actually wanted to do. And if I'd gone straight to university, I don't think I would have done that. The other great thing is I still have lots of friends all over the world I can sometimes catch up with. And when I hang out with my friends in the UK, like Tom, who went around Europe and we got arrested together in Paraguay for no reason, like every time we meet up, somehow we tell the story of me nearly getting raped by a police officer because we didn't want to pay $100 for their stupid scam. And those memories are incredibly valuable to me. Let's say I'd stayed at home and spent more time in that medical record place scanning and saved like another £7,000. What does that mean to me now? Like, I can't go and buy being an 18-year-old that's driving a stupid BMW across America, doing plenty of stupid stuff. I can't spend that money on giving 20-year-old me the confidence to start a business whilst I'm at university that changed the rest of my life. Sure, if I'd saved £7,000, it might even be worth £50,000 now, but those memories and experiences are a much bigger investment that have paid dividends for the rest of my life. And they'll keep paying me until the day that I die. Now, Bill Perkins calls this the memory dividend. Unlike stocks or bonds, experiences don't pay dividends quarterly. They pay dividends constantly over your entire life. Every time you remember, every time you tell a story, every time you connect with someone over a shared experience, these memories, they're getting better over time, and your brain filters out the annoying parts. The food poisoning, the missed trains, the bad sleep, and it keeps the magic. Psychologists call this the rosy retrospection effect. And it's great because if your life feels so much better in hindsight than maybe some of the moments when you live it, but that's fine when you compare it to, say, buying a car. When you drive it off the lot after you've bought it, you've immediately lost 20% of its value. 5 years later, it's worth half of what you paid. 20 years later, it's pretty much worthless. But the memory of having a Mexican drug dealer answer the door to a lost 19-year-old British guy and shiftily telling him that it's too dangerous for me to be walking about and kind-heartedly making me stay with him is a memory that keeps appreciating forever. Researchers have shown that experiences resist the effect of hedonic adaptation far better than possessions do. And hedonic adaptation is the fancy term for just getting used to stuff. I'm sure you know that when you buy a new phone, you're excited for a few days and then it's just your phone. You buy a luxury car and it's thrilling for a few months, but then you still get used to it. It's just a thing you have. And next year you start noticing the new model already looks better and you already feel like you're lacking. And in fact, when it comes to things, your brain basically has a baseline of happiness and it keeps snapping back to that baseline no matter what stuff you buy. And that's why lottery winners return to their pre-winning levels of happiness within a year or two. More stuff that you have doesn't actually move the needle. Whereas experiences work differently. They become a part of your identity, they connect you to other people, and they provide what researchers call anticipatory pleasure. So before they even happen, you're enjoying the expectation. After it's ended, you have nostalgic pleasure. And that's as well as the actual experience of doing it. So you get happiness 3 times, looking forwards, experiencing, and remembering. Whereas when you buy stuff, you're excited when you get it, you have a nice feeling of the day and maybe for a week or 2 afterwards, and then it just gets boring, and that's it. So a nice idea to think about is called the middle path that the Buddha taught like 2,500 years ago. It's not about completely denying yourself everything and living like a monk, and it's not about hedonism where you blow all your money on fleeting pleasures, but it's something in between. Using your resources wisely to create genuine fulfillment without attachment to just material things. An interesting thing is you can't cling to an experience the way you cling to a possession. An experience happens and it passes away. It becomes a memory, and the memory enriches your life without you needing to own the experience or control anything, or being annoyed if it breaks or gets lost or someone takes it from you. It's just your experience. None of those things can happen to it. And so when we think about money, It took your time to make it, and it could be used to make experiences. Let's say you had $500,000. It's sitting in the bank account. Currently, it's neutral. It does nothing at all. And I'm not denying that it gives you a sense of security. Whatever money it takes to help you be able to sleep at night, I think that is a priority. But beyond that, using whatever money you have to do things that are important to you is really good. Taking your aging parents on a trip that they've dreamed about their whole lives, that's like a virtuous thing to do. That's wise. That's understanding what actually matters before it's too late. Right, we will be back in a while after the adverts to discuss how to make the most of different opportunities before they pass you by. What can your body do right now that it won't be able to do in 20 years' time, for example? Can you run a mile? Can you sleep on the ground without waking up in pain? Can you eat street food in India without spending 3 days in bed? Can you stay up until 3 a.m. talking and still function the next day? Can you pick up your kid or someone else's kid and throw them in the air? These are all things that some people can do, and slowly you won't be able to do them. Your body is basically a melting ice cube. Every single day you can do slightly less than you could do yesterday, and the decline is so gradual you don't notice it until you look back and realize that things you used to do easily are now impossible. Bill Perkins calls this the health wealth curve. When you're young, you have maximum health and energy, but minimal money. When you're old, you hopefully have more money, but you have declining health and energy. So there's a sweet spot in the middle where you do have both. But it's important to know that different experiences have different expiration dates. Luckily, backpacking across Europe, sleeping in hostels, partying in dawn, you can do all that before 35 and it doesn't necessarily cost you that much. But I can tell you that your body will hate you for it if you try and do it after that. If you want to go rock climbing, probably better before 45. Running a marathon, it's definitely easier to get started on before 50, but if you train regularly, you could still be doing it when you're 60 or even 70 if you're dedicated. Then, of course, things like having biological children or playing with your grandkids. There's a window for when that is optimal and when it's no longer an option. When we think about these important experiences in life, sometimes if you do them too early, you might not have the money to make the most of it, but if you wait too long, you won't have the body to be able to enjoy it. And you have to admit to yourself that once the window closes, it does get closed forever. You can't go back and make your 25-year-old knees reappear so you can finally hike the Inca Trail. Remember Seneca's advice where he said that you'll realize you are dying prematurely, not because your life is ending, but because you never used it. You have been preoccupied whilst life hastens on, meanwhile death will arrive, and you have no choice in making yourself available for that. Or think about the Buddhist in Nietzsche. Everything is constantly changing. The teenager in you has already died. The college student in you is dead. The version of you that could stay up all night and function the next day, possibly gone forever. Mine certainly is. And sadly, we die 1,000 small deaths on our way to the final one. And each death closes certain doors, and every day that you wait to walk through a door whilst it is still open is a day that door moves slightly closer to closing. So the rational thing to do, the Stoic thing, the Buddhist thing, the modern psychology advice thing, they all agree. Match your spending to your life stage. And actually don't save all your money up until you're 75 and you can barely move. Spend it when your body can actually use it to have experiences that are quite literally physically impossible later on. Right, I said I would talk about inheritance and the fact that maybe we do want to pass money on and legacy to our children and family, or make a difference in the world with charity and donations and things. That's great. Very important, and I do agree that we don't want to be completely reckless and have nothing to give to others. But here's a story that might make you rethink how you do it and what generational wealth might mean. So for example, let's take Sarah. She inherited $73,000 when her mother died. Sarah was 61 years old. She'd already put both her kids through college, she'd already bought her house, she'd already built her career, and she was 3 years away from retirement and already had a solid pension saved up. So, of course, $73,000, it's nice, no one's complaining, and she used it to do some remodeling of her kitchen, some money in her savings, but it didn't change her life in any way. However, 30 years earlier, when Sarah was 31, $73,000 could have been transformative, or even if it was like $15,000, that still would have been more important to her then. She could have put a down payment on a house instead of renting for another decade. She could have started the business she'd been dreaming about. She could have taken a year off with her kids when they were young instead of rushing back to work after just 6 weeks of maternity leave. At 31, that money had what Bill Perkins calls peak utility. At 61, it's just like, Sure, nice, fine, that's helpful, but no way changing her life. So this is the inheritance trap that people often fall into. We leave money to our kids when we die, not when they need it. The average age for receiving an inheritance is around 60, but the age when that money can have the maximum impact on someone's life is between 25 and 35. When you're struggling to buy a house, when you're thinking about whether you can afford to have kids or not, when you're thinking about having that sabbatical to follow your dream or visit some cool places that you don't have time to normally whilst you're working. So Bill calls traditional inheritance the 3 R's. He says it's giving random amounts of money at random times to random people. And since you don't even know which of your heirs will still be alive when you die, how is that really caring for your family? How is that wise? He says that we're acting out of fear. We have fear of running out now. We have fear of losing control. We have fear of our own death itself. Buddhism teaches that fear comes from attachment, specifically attachment to the illusion of permanence. We act like we can somehow keep our money forever, and we act like we're taking it with us, but we're not. When you die, your money has exactly 0 value to you, like none, because you don't exist. And for all practical purposes, your money might as well not exist either. So clinging to it is a form of delusion. You're suffering now, denying yourself the use of it for yourself or the use of it for your loved ones, where you can experience the joy that it actually could give them. Instead, you're protecting against a future that's fundamentally uncertain. The Stoics have a slightly different angle on this, but they reach the same conclusion. Marcus Aurelius wrote constantly about duty to family, but he understood that duty actually meant help, not just symbolic gestures. And if you leave money in a will, that's very passive. It's easy to do. It requires no sacrifice from you in the present moment. Giving money today, whilst you're alive, when it creates maximum impact, that actually changes someone else's life trajectory. That shows that you're willing to take a risk and invest something of yours whilst you have it. That's virtue. That takes courage. That requires wisdom. And the best part, of course, is that when you give whilst you're alive, you get to witness the impact. You get to say, hey, I made a difference in someone's life, and be there to see it. If you see your daughter buy her first house, if you watch your son start that business he's been dreaming about, if your kids afford to have grandkids earlier whilst you're young enough to play with them, that's incredible. You're creating experiences together with the money that you're giving. And those, of course, become your memories too, and shared memories with these people who live on after you. And they pay memory dividends for the rest of your life and the lives of your loved ones. And this is worth infinitely more than watching a number in your bank account get slightly bigger on a bank statement, and that's it. I think this is a really important thing that people miss these days, especially as house prices are so ridiculous and so many 30-year-old people are stressed and prioritizing work and trying to get onto the property ladder over having kids. There are going to be a lot of grandparents across the world might never see their grandkids, or if they do, they're going to be too old to enjoy having time with them. And if they were able to be more generous earlier in their life, they could really actually have more fun experiences from it. That is one of the reasons why I think this book is so good and important. It helps us question what is the point of the money that we have, and what do we want to achieve with our life, and what experiences do we want to take part in. Sure, I don't want to tell people exactly what they should go and do with their lives, but it's nice to ask some questions. Right, now let's talk about Bill's strategy of how you actually can die with 0 without dying broke at, say, 75 or something. Sure, it's a lovely theory to spend more time investing in experiences and helping others whilst you can enjoy that help. But of course, you don't actually want to end up destitute or eating cat food in your 80s, because that I don't think would be good. Now, the general strategy that most people take is saving as much as they can. And many people even end up with more money at 80 than they had at 60, even when they're spending some of it, because they're spending less and it's compounding and they love seeing the number going up. However, Bill reckons that your net worth should be peaking somewhere between 45 and 60 and then intentionally declining as you spend on the most important things that you can enjoy whilst you're alive. So here is his actual strategy. Firstly, he wants you to calculate your actual survival number. What does it cost you per year to stay alive and reasonably comfortable? That's like food, housing, healthcare, basic utilities. For most people in retirement, this is actually probably going to be $30,000 to $50,000 a year. Perhaps a bit more in expensive cities, maybe less if you own your home outright. Secondly, you should be estimating your lifespan, which sounds very morbid, but it's pretty essential. So look at your family history, talk to your doctor, get some real data on your health. Are you likely to actually live to 75, 85, 95? And you can't really plan very well to die with 0 if you don't know when that will be. And sure, it's natural to want to look at the optimistic side that you might live slightly longer. But equally, if you died 10 years earlier than you're expecting, that's like 10 years worth of money that you just never spent and didn't get to enjoy in the few years that you actually are alive. So it is worth trying to be slightly accurate here. Otherwise, you miss the point of actually enjoying your money, right? Now, the third thing he talks about is the concept of time bucketing, where he says you should divide your life into 5, maybe 10-year chunks and think about what are the important experiences you want to have in each chunk. Maybe when you're 30 to 40, you want to travel to Japan, learn to surf, have kids, run a marathon. 40 to 50, you want to be taking those kids to national parks. Maybe you want to learn woodworking or hike the Appalachian Trail. 50 to 60, perhaps you want to spend a month in Italy or learn to paint, mentor some young people in your field, pay for your kids' college. 60 to 70, you might be hoping to spend time with your grandkids, which might involve helping your kids buy a house. You might want to write that book you always talked about, deepen your friendships. 70 to 80, maybe gardening, reading the things you never had time for, telling stories and having time with family. Each of these buckets needs different amounts of money, and it's worth remembering that the earlier a bucket is, the more weight you should give it because of it has a much longer memory dividend window. Like a cool memory when you're 20 could last for the next 60 years, whereas a cool memory when you're 80 only has a few more years of existing. Once you map out your plan for what you want to do with your life, you can start working backwards. How much do these different life experiences cost that you want to have between 30 and 80, and what do you need to survive? If you add them up, they might be like $250,000. Might sound like a lot, but for all the cool life experiences across your entire life, it doesn't feel like that much. Maybe it's like less than $5,000 a year, basically, for all the cool stuff you've ever wanted to do with your life. And you're like, it's quite doable. And then you think about your survival costs, and that's more like $40,000 a year. And you can add these things up and calculate the exact numbers. And for most people, the real amount of money you totally need is lower than you probably think. Now, he does have a final idea here. If you are very terrified about living your money, then you can buy an annuity. And that's basically an insurance policy kind of against the risk that you live too long. So you give an insurance company a lump sum and they pay you a guaranteed amount every month until you die, even if you live to 110. And this is what the Stoics mean by focusing on what you can control. You can't control when you die, ultimately, but you can't control market crashes or inflation, or whether your body breaks down at 65 or 85, or whether your knees or heart fails at 60 or 90. But you can control whether you use your money intentionally to create a meaningful life, or whether you let fear make you hoard it until someone else inherits it. This middle path that we're looking at isn't about reckless spending. It's not buying Lamborghinis and bottles of champagne at the club. It's about strategy, intentional use of your resources at the right time in your life for the right experiences that create lasting fulfillment. And that for me is wisdom, balance, and it's recognizing that money sitting in a bank account does nothing, but money transformed into experiences does become part of who you are. So let's do a final reflection. Coming back to Bronnie Ware and her palliative care patients. Imagine that you are there in your final weeks. Your body is shutting down. Someone comes to your house every day to see how you are. You're watching reruns of Countdown, which couldn't be more ironic for someone with little time left. You know that this is it. What are you thinking about? Probably not your career achievements. Probably not how much money you made. Probably not your job title or your car, or the amount of rooms in your house. You're probably thinking about people, family, friends. Did they think you were a good person? Did you add to their life? Were you kind, funny, generous? Did you do things with them? You're maybe thinking about moments. You think about that time you laughed so hard you couldn't breathe. The mountains that you climbed, the trips that you almost didn't take, your kid's face when they figured something out for the first time. Those days where you had no plan, but you took a chance and one thing leads to another, and you're having a jacuzzi in Japan with your old lecturer that you saw in the forest and you're surrounded by snow, laughing at how boring his lectures used to be. And that is totally a true story that happened to me once. Yes, you think about experiences. Seneca wrote that you should hold an audit of your life. Reckon how much of your time has been taken up by a moneylender, how much by a mistress, a patron, a client, quarreling with your wife, punishing your slaves, dashing about the city on your social obligations. You will find that you have fewer years than you reckon. And he wrote that in 49 AD, but it's still true today. Most people get to the end, realize they spent 40 years working for money they never used. They saved for someday, and someday never came. They die with money in the bank and gaps in their life where experiences should have been. That's why Bill Perkins, and me perhaps a little bit, would encourage you to die differently, to die with $0 and a lifetime of memory dividends. It's not irresponsible to be as rich as possible in the ways that actually matter when you die. to get over our need to hold on to things and money in a world where time robs us of everything anyway. Buddhists call it non-attachment, letting go of the illusion that you can possess anything permanently. Money is impermanent. Your body is impermanent. The only thing that persists is how fully you lived. Is how fully you lived your life. The Stoics call it wisdom, understanding what's actually valuable, virtue, relationships, meaningful experience, and they clarify what is indifferent, things like money, status, possessions. And the only point of these indifferent things is to use them as tools to create the valuable things. In modern psychology, we call it maximizing well-being, but we're all saying the same thing. The business of life is the acquisition of memories and not money. So here's your homework, I guess. Think about an experience that you've been putting off, something you want to do whilst your body can still do it, and something that will pay you memory dividends for perhaps the next 30 years. Do some maths, calculate what it costs, then ask yourself, is the money in my account more valuable than that memory? Because that clock is ticking, and every day you wait is a day closer to the window closing. Every year you defer is a year of memory dividends that you're losing. Every day you work, you are trading your finite life, your finite energy for money. And the question is whether you're trading that money back into life experiences, back into a life worth living. All right, deep topic today. Hope you enjoyed it. I will be doing a part 2 next week, diving more into the idea of living a life truer to ourselves and expanding on the concepts of different deaths that we die across our lives, because I like that one. For now, if you like the ideas, I can recommend reading the full book called Die With Zero by Bill Perkins. I can, of course, recommend exploring plenty of times ideas from Stoicism and Buddhism or psychology as well, Taoism, philosophy. There's plenty of areas that are worth perusing if you are curious. Right. And on that, if you know anyone who is money rich and poor in time, do shoot them this episode and tell them to sort their life out already. A great review or comment in your preferred app of choice will go a long way to making me feel like I'm not wasting my life. And if you enjoy thinking about time and how short our lives are, well, my new show is going through what humanity has done over the last 3 million years, and it's certainly given me some perspective on how mind-bogglingly short life is, and to prioritize getting busy doing the things that actually matter to you. That podcast is called How to Change the World and available on any podcast player ever. And with that, I will catch you next week. Thank you so much for listening.
Go you!
Your consistency to reach the end of an episode is legendary.
My hero!
If you have any ideas or feedback for the show, I'm always interested to hear from you.
You're the best!
Studies show we need time for information to sink in, so I'm going to give you a 5-second pause. Silence. To reflect on one idea from the show before you jump back into your busy life. Ready and go.